edition of the AfterBuzz. Hello, everybody. How are we all doing today? Hopefully, your Wednesday is going great. That was quite an interesting show that we had today, with good old Buzzley being gone. And I do want to tell you that the cookies that we were making in the George Foreman grill, guess what? Came out a-okay. And Lisa is still currently working on the bike, the scooter, if you will. And it's turning out pretty stinking good. Like, we're decking this thing out for Halloween. She got some spiders and stuff like that. It's gonna be looking pretty top notch. So, as always, welcome to the AfterBuzz. It's happening Wednesdays, 10:30 Mountain Time here on the KLAQ YouTube channel. If you're checking this out as a podcast on iTunes or through Google Play, you can always check it out live that way on YouTube. You can get involved with the chat if you have any questions, comments, whatever. By all means, you are more than welcome to go ahead and fire away in the YouTube chat. Or if you want to send something after the fact, if you have something maybe you want brought up later on down the line, or maybe you want to comment on something else after the fact, you can always email me. It's brandon.coates, that's COATES, at townsquaremedia.com. We'll get to just a few things today. The interesting thing when I do the AfterBuzz after doing the show, it becomes more difficult because some of the topics that I wanted to cover, or some of the things that we were going to go over on the AfterBuzz, get covered on the show, and it gets kind of repetitive. I tried not to do that today because there were some specific topics that I was going to talk about on the AfterBuzz today. The first one being football. It's back. You got college football. The first week was pretty cool. You had a lot of top 25 matchups, with one school going up against another school that was ranked in the top 25. Clearly, some of those schools should not have been ranked in the top 25. Florida State, for one. Miami did not look good in that first week up against LSU. And then this past weekend, you have Florida, the Gators, losing for the first time in over 30 years to Kentucky in football. Which I'm not going to lie, kind of, brought a smile to my face because Florida fans can be pretty obnoxious. I don't hate the Gators. It's just, I got some friends who are diehard Gator fans, and it's pretty interesting watching them because they have been the pinnacle for a while. You got the great Florida teams, especially Florida's one of those rare schools where you get a really solid football and basketball program. You've got that with Florida. Ohio State is another one where you got two really top-notch schools there, but it's really quite an interesting day when Kentucky finally knocks off Florida there. But in regards to NFL football, the big stories, Patriots signed a bunch of guys. Le'Veon Bell still has not reported to the Steelers. And I was this close in my fantasy football league, which, yes, I got roped. I know I've said I wasn't planning on doing fantasy football this year, but to make it even teams, I had to stick around because we had two teams drop out, so I'm rocking an 8-team league right now. And so I did end up with one. I don't have the time to study as much as I used to, which is one of the reasons I really didn't want to do it, but I'm kind of doing it anyway, and I was this close to picking up James Conner and putting him in my starting lineup. I got a pretty solid team as it is. It was all auto-drafted. I got, let me think here, I got Cam Newton, I got David Johnson, I got Jordan Howard, I've got A.J. Green, who else do I have? I think Keenan Allen. My tight end is Zach Ertz. And then I got a bunch of possible flex guys. And I damn near put up James Conner. But I didn't pick him up. I was like, you know what? It doesn't really matter. I wouldn't have won anyway because with my buddy who I was playing, he had Alvin Kamara, and that dude went off on Sunday. And even if I had started James Conner in place of whoever was my lowest scorer, I still would have lost by like 10 points or something like that. But it just showed, it just sucks you in. Fantasy football, it always sucks you in. So I'm going to try to keep up with it as much as I can. It was a really good first week of NFL football. Riley McCarron found out that if you're a New England Patriot and you fumble the football, your butt is going to be gone pretty darn quick. He was the one who he was returning, or he was going to go for the punt right towards the end of the game. Bounces off his face mask. Houston recovers. Houston scores a touchdown. All of a sudden, it's 27-20, and we got a game there with 2 minutes to go. So, anyway, if there's anything you guys want to bring up, in regards to football. You're more than welcome to do that here in the YouTube chat. Last weekend in college football was awful. Other than Florida losing to Kentucky, it was one of those weekends where it's like all of the top 25 schools are playing the cupcakes, and you're seeing scores like I think the Oregon Ducks won 62 to 14 or 17 or something like that, and it's just one of those things that's just really, um, you know, it's a bad week for college football is what that is. I mean, I understand why they do it, but it just leads to really, really boring games. Prince Chaos is asking, Brandon, when do you think you might explore more on the RP aspect side of things as I did with D&D? I'm not quite sure what RP is. If you could actually spell that out, that'd be great. And David is saying the Nebraska-Colorado game. Yeah, I was kind of bummed with that one because I'm a Scott Frost guy because a while ago Scott Frost was with Oregon, and then he went to UCF, and now he's made his way back home to Nebraska after having UCF go undefeated last year. So I'm hoping and I'm rooting for Scott Frost to have a pretty solid game, tenure there at Nebraska, but it did not start out well by losing to Colorado. Role playing. So here's the deal. So one of the aspects with that, because that's really all I needed to cover for the most part on in regards to football, just crappy college games last weekend. NFL had some really solid ones. That Aaron Rodgers comeback was awesome. He's doing it on one leg. Khalil Mack is a beast. Like, that dude is just an absolute freak. It was pretty cool. It was enjoyable watching some of those football games. Of course, I got to watch more than usual because I threw my damn back out. So I spent most of the weekend on the couch. I mean, my back's still not quite right yet. It's still kind of wonky. Okay, so a couple other questions here. Earlier on the morning show, we were making cookies with the George Foreman grill. They turned out just fine. It cooks them a little uneven, so the whole point is you kind of prop the lid so the lid isn't sitting down on the cookies all the way. You put a piece of foil on the bottom, and then you take just a standard mug, and that keeps the lid open so it hovers over the top of the cookie and it cooks them. And you need to do about double the time. If it says 10 to 14, you're probably going to have them in there for about a half an hour. But it bakes the cookies. An interesting thing that I found out, and I've already forgotten what the thing was called, but Joanna was telling us how they would have this drink when she was a kid that was milk, raw egg, and cinnamon. And they would drink that. And it was like if you're anemic or something like that, it's beneficial for that. And I asked Joanna, I'm like, you do realize that the raw egg, that's the part of the cookie dough that's bad for you. That's the part that they tell you will give you salmonella is the raw egg. But you would drink this drink that had raw egg, and it kind of blew her mind. So anyway, it was it's quite an interesting show today, I got to say. So I'm a little scatterbrained still right now because there's a lot going on there. Towards the end of the show, the scooter, it's turning out nice. Lisa's putting in some quality work on that scooter. I think it's going to look really good. I think everybody's going to be pretty impressed with it. What was that? Somebody else asked a question here in the YouTube chat. I can't remember. Oh, there was Prince Chaos. You were asking about role playing and stuff. So if you would like, we are going to have like a kind of a mini bachelor party for me here coming up on Friday, where it's going to be, and what we're hoping to do is we're going to spend a few hours out at Military Gamer Supply, and then we'll go spend a few hours out at Glitch Gaming Center. So you've got like tabletop board, role-playing games and stuff like that for a few hours at Military Gamer Supply, and then for a few hours we'll go do some like computer virtual reality games out at Glitch Gaming Center. So when we get more details, I'll probably put up a blog or we'll put up some information about it, but people are more than welcome to come hang out with us. I think we're going to start at Military Gamer Supply at 5:30 on Friday night. We're trying to see if Glitch will stay open because they're usually only open until 10 o'clock on Friday. So we're not quite sure what we're going to be able to do there, but I think they're going to have their the sword fighters out there. Like they have people who actually do fencing and stuff out there out at Military Gamer Supply, and then eventually we'll head on over to Glitch Gaming Center. And Prince Chaos is asking if that's an open invitation. Absolutely. The whole point was to, go give Military Gamer Supply some love and to give Glitch Gaming Center some love. So we're just going to go hang out and play some video games and play some board games, and we're just going to have a blast for a few hours, and then we'll call it good. Next topic. One of the things that got brought up this week, and it's something that's kind of been brought up recently, is like the issue of morality and the way Buzz kind of angles arguments a specific way. And the one thing we were talking about is how adamant he is that you should not steal movies, and if you stream movies for free, you're killing the movie industry. Yeah, he's technically right. I mean, it's in a sense, um, by bootlegging movies and stuff, you are stealing the movie. But the interesting thing I find out about it, and a lot of you guys in the YouTube chat were also bringing this up, where do you draw your morality line? Because Buzz has been very open about how he would sneak food into the movie theater. At one point, he actually snuck in a steak and a potato, like full on. And it, the interesting thing is how he will be on his high horse about one thing, but if you bring up something else, it gets pushed to the side or gets poo-pooed, and it's like, oh, well, that's not that big of a deal. And I was like, no, really, it is, because what you're doing is by not purchasing food from the concession at the movie theater, if you're going to eat something, you're not supporting the movie theater, which is the medium, the avenue, the venue that shows the movie that you want to see. So if those go away, then your movies go away. It's like, it's very interesting to see where morals are kind of that line is drawn, and which side are you going to be on, and do you think something is acceptable versus not acceptable? One thing that I have done before, and I'm willing to admit it, is if you have some sort of a streaming service and you can get a movie online for free, I'll check it out. But then if it's a movie I really like, I'll go buy that movie. I'll go purchase it because I do want to continue to support the people who made that movie, from the producer to the director to the actors, all the way down to the people who were the ones, the catering staff, to the state, the grips, and then whatever the hell else there is. And so I will specifically go out and buy it. The thing that made me start doing that is I would go to the movie theater and there was some shit movies out. I mean, these movies sucked. So I was tired of wasting my money on bad movies. And so if I would go watch a good quality movie, and if I watched it for free or however I was watching it, I would go buy it. That would be my way of supporting it. But if it was a crappy movie, then by all means, go fuck yourselves. Like, your movie sucked. Put out better work. But it's kind of, and like, it always reminds me of the episode of The Office, the ethics episode, when they find out that Meredith's been banging that dude for a discount on something they're getting in Outback Steakhouse coupons. And Andy, well, would you steal a loaf of bread to feed your family? And those are like the age-old ethical questions, and it's and it's morality, and where do you draw your specific line when it comes to what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Eric in the YouTube chat now, he's saying, I think there would be less complaining and more sales if the concession prices were to drop. That is one thing I think is pretty true. Is they really jack that thing up, and it's like the small starts at $5, and then, I'm sorry, it's not even a small anymore. You start with medium, and then you have large, then you have super large, and then you've got heart attack size popcorn, like that. Those are your sizes that you're getting there. And then it's interesting where everybody's kind of morals are different, and where will you draw that line, and where are you willing to be like, hey, that's not cool, but that is cool. And that's something that I've especially learned, in the 38 years I've been on this planet, living in multiple places in the United States and visiting multiple places on the globe, is that everybody's are different. And the one thing that I know for myself that I always try to do is just be consistent. Is the main thing. Is if you have consistency in your morals, I think that shows the kind of person that you are, as opposed to somebody who will make exceptions constantly. Like, if you're making an exception for a reason of doing something, that's a major problem. And that's where I think a lot of people get lost, and where a lot of people don't exactly know what, they struggle with their identity, or they struggle with who they are as a person, because they're constantly making exceptions to fit something that they want. Like, that's something that we're trying to teach the kid at home at this point, is that there's going to be times, there's things that you want, but you're not going to get it. You should always strive for what you want. You should always work for what you want. But there are going to be times where you try your hardest, You do your best work, and yet you still fail. And you know what? Those times are going to happen. And those are probably the most difficult times to deal with, especially as a kid, because when you're a child, you're thinking, I did everything right. Why am I not getting what I want? And unfortunately, that is how life works. There are going to be those scenarios. And as a parent, you need to be able to go through and you need to be able to, show your kids all aspects. That's why I can't stand these parents that I see who just give their kids everything. Their kid starts whining about something and immediately, oh, well, just to shut the kid up. That's not being a parent. Like that's just being lazy, and that's what's ruining certain things because then that child is learning. Well, if I just whine, I'm going to get what I want. No, I'm sorry, that's not the case. I'm, beneficial as to most people because I'm kind of dead inside. So the crying and all that stuff, it doesn't work on me. I'm dead inside. Like, good luck. But no, I mean, in reality, like it doesn't really work on me. Like we've talked about this on the air when we were talking to Buzz about it, and we were talking about the girl. It's the video of the girl wanting waffles, and she's in tears. I can't stop thinking about waffles. And the mom's like, "Well, you had them for breakfast, you had them for lunch. We're gonna have something else for dinner. You got to try something else." And kid just in tears. And Buzz is like, "Oh, I'd be getting that kid waffles in a heartbeat because the tears get me every time." And for me, like I understand the kid crying, I understand where the kid's coming from, but by all means, that doesn't mean you're going to get waffles. Like that's not benefiting that kid in any way, shape, or form. If anything, that's more detrimental to that kid, not only at that moment, but then growing up as a human being, because you're not showing them that, hey, there are going to be times where you're not going to get what you want, and that's okay. It doesn't need to always go your way. One of the best life lessons that you can learn is dealing with failure or dealing with not getting what you want and being able to move on in a quick and happy way and not let that crap get to you. And unfortunately, I think there's far too many people out there. And I see it with my kid, with parents at the school and stuff like that. Now, there are some really good ones. Don't get me wrong. There's some good parents out there. But you see those ones, man, it's like the helicopter parent who's, sitting there, it's like watching the kid. The kid wants something, they immediately grab it. And it's just, like you can't do that. It's not benefiting that kid at all, and that's where they're going to learn their morals. That's where they're going to learn their ethics. Is what are they learning from their parents? And that's one thing that me and my fiance constantly talk about with each other. Is that we want to make sure that what we're doing, it's because it's not only how you interact with the child, it's how we interact together. It's how we interact with the outside world. The kid picks up on that stuff. The kid's going to see that, and those traits. And if there's something you don't like about yourself, if there's something that is a personal, some sort of a fault that you have, then you need to work on that, because otherwise you're just going to pass that crap on to your kid, and that's not what you want. Like there's a lot of things. I'm far from perfect. There's a whole hell of a lot of things that I work on a daily basis. And I'm never going to be perfect, but I can at least work on them. And if I can show the kid, as long as you're continuing to improve who you are, then you're going to be the best possible person you can be. You're never going to be perfect. But as long as you're working towards bettering yourself than who you were before, then by all means, that's the only thing I could ever ask of her. And hopefully that makes her the happiest, healthiest child and adult she could ever possibly be. So anyway, there was a nice little parenting rant for you. I'm glad that you guys were able to stick around for that. Next topic that I was, and I'm going to actually switch this up a little bit here because it's is it Georgia? I think was the story where they like paddling was now okay, and not a chance in hell. Like, I'm sorry, you're not touching my kid. Like, there's punishments. I will agree with punishments. They basically have a coloring system where my kid's at. You're in green. If you get in trouble, you go to yellow. If you get in big trouble, you go to red. If you do really well, you go to blue. Really, really good, you go to purple. And I think it resets every day where every kid starts in green. So you're resetting every single day, and that's how you start. And then just kind of, depending on where you're going, is where you can end up that day. And she's had a couple of days where she's ended up in yellow, and she's had a couple of days where she's ended up in purple. And the best thing is, I think she's learning from both experiences. She's learning that how good it feels to be in blue or purple, but also how poor it felt when she wasn't in green, when she ended up in yellow that day. So, like, that's kind of the aspect that I'm liking of this. But if you were to ever try to touch my kid or spank my kid, I'm gonna knock your fucking teeth out. Like, there's not a chance in hell. I'm not even gonna spank my kid. Like, that's it. For me personally, I was spanked as a kid, and I don't necessarily see anything wrong with it. I see something wrong when it's done out of anger. When it's done out of rage is when there's a major problem. For me personally, I'm a klutz and I'm a fairly strong guy. I'm not going to lay a hand on the kid because I don't know what I'm doing to her. I would rather sit down and talk to her. If you beat the shit out of your kid, then you need to have your kid taken away. But a swat on the behind or something like that, I don't see anything wrong with that as long as you're not doing severe fucking damage to the kid. But for me personally, yeah, I'm not going to do it because, for all I know, I'm going to smack her too hard and something, seriously bad's going to happen. But no, as far as a teacher hitting my kid, there's not a chance in hell I'm going to allow you to do that. But I believe in punishment. Like, it doesn't have to be physical, but punishment is just to show the kid like there's negative consequences to negative actions. But it's, there's a broader spectrum to that. What I was just talking about when it comes to if you are, sometimes you're going to try your hardest and you're still going to fail. Like, these are all things that kids need to learn while they're growing up, and hopefully they get a nice balance of that. Because you don't want to stress them out too much. You don't want them to try to be too perfect. That was something that I struggled with when I first stepped into this relationship with my fiance and her daughter. Is I myself am a perfectionist. I beat myself up all the time, and I started to I would look at the kid to and almost be overly harping or overly don't do that or do this and these other things, and we could see the change in her because she's really smart and she sees that. And she was trying too hard, and it was causing too much. So that's when we're like, okay, we got to back off on this thing. I need to back off on this thing because the whole point isn't to stress her out. The whole point isn't to make her miserable. The whole point isn't to make her strive for perfection. The whole point is to learn life lessons and to eventually just be the best damn person you can possibly be. And I was failing at that early on when I kind of got thrust into this relationship, and I'm still learning, and I'm going to continue to learn. And if we happen to have any kids, I'm going to learn through those kids too. But that's probably, one of the coolest parts about having kids that I've noticed, getting thrust into this thing is how you just try to, learn as best you can and make it seem like you know what the fuck you're talking about. Chances are, you don't know what you're talking about. But in regards to school punishments, man, I still remember 6th grade. If you didn't turn in this one homework assignment, or if you missed X amount of homework assignments, you ended up, you had to stay after school, and then your parents had to come pick you up after it was a half an hour or something like that. And I remember it was Scooter. It was one of my best friends, Scooter. And he and we forgot the same assignment, and I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, right as the bell rings and everybody's kind of there, all of a sudden he, left, and then he was gone. And I'm like, well, what the fuck? Why isn't Scooter here? It's because his parents didn't feel that the punishment was necessary. And I thought it was so weird at that time. And now we're in this sense where that's how a lot of parents are feeling. And hold on, let me check the YouTube chat here. Yada yada yada. Oh, Prince Gas. He said he was going to switch topic, but it's the same. Well, I was going to switch topics, but this part I'm switching up the order I'm doing things in because this one had more to do with what I was talking about before. I'm going to get to the other stuff here later. But that's what I meant by that, was how I was going to switch topics, but I'm switching up the order here, where I'm going to be talking about from morality into these school punishments and stuff like that. And now we're to the point where these, you got parents who don't believe at all. And in a sense, some of the parents that they have a right to probably believe that, because there are some teachers that just absolutely phone it in out there. I hope my kid never gets stuck with a teacher like that. I do homework daily with my kid, whatever the schedule may be, to take her home, which, by the way, benefiting me learning Spanish because she's in the dual language program. So that allows me to learn Spanish with her, which is fucking amazing. But that's, let's see, I completely got sidetracked right there. I forgot what the fuck I was talking about. But, get parents who, like they feel they don't need to listen to the teacher. And you do have some of the teachers out there that are lazy, but then you also have the opposite of the teachers who are very invested. And maybe you have a parent who thinks their child should be a lot further along, or their child's a lot smarter than they think, when in reality it's like, yeah, maybe your kid's not as smart as you think that they are. And that's where it's this fine balance, and that's why you need to be involved with everything that your kid is doing. Like if you have them in like a dance class or soccer or any kind of activity like a reading uh, book club or whatever the hell it is, you got to be involved in it because you need to know what the hell is going on, and you need to be involved with your kid. And that's where a lot of this gets lost, is you have the parents who think their kids are the greatest damn thing on the planet when in reality they probably are not. So when the teacher comes out and says something to the kid of, well, you need to work harder at this, or you need to do this, the parents immediately side with the child, and that's wrong. Like, that's not going to benefit anybody. Um, but I do remember, and this is just kind of a funny story. I remember it was my sophomore or junior year in high school, and I can't remember what the class was called, but it was like a social studies kind of class. And we had to give presentations, and you did book reports. And I think I've mentioned on here how and I mentioned it on the show how I was obsessed with the mafia, all the stories about the mafia from like Sam Giancana and all the Bugsy Siegel and all those guys. And I would do a lot of the reports on that. And I was also obsessed with the JFK assassination, so I would do book reports on like how the mafia was behind JFK and all this other stuff. And um, there was this one class where you do the report and then you'd have to go give a presentation in the front of the class, and we would set the desks up so they were like a U in the classroom. And I remember where I'm sitting, and the teacher would sit directly behind me to the right, as the students were giving a presentation. And there was this one kid who was super quiet, and like he and I, like before the class, he and I got into an argument about something, and the kid was just being a jerk off to me, and I was probably being a piece of shit to this kid, and we were bickering back and forth and whatever. And so then he's giving his presentation, and I'm in the front, and the teacher's right behind me, and the teacher's like doing this as the kid's trying to speak. I can't hear him because the kid's talking like this while he's giving his presentation. So he's quiet. I can't understand what he's saying. And so the kid keeps looking back because the teacher keeps doing this thumbs up thing, like, dude, speak up, we can't hear you. That was one of the reasons the teacher would sit in the back of the class, was to make sure you were projecting, to make sure that you were actually, getting it out there so that the whole class could hear you. And after about 2 minutes of this, nobody can hear him. And one kid over here is falling asleep, and I just randomly go, "Speak the fuck up!" Like I yelled it, and I yelled it pretty damn loud. And the teacher immediately, like without missing a beat, just sticks his left foot out and goes, boom, and he kicks my desk, knocking me out of the desk. The whole class erupts in laughter. It was fucking hilarious. Really, the fact that he kicked me, not what I yelled. What I yelled was a dick move, but he was, for him kicking me out of the chair, it was funny. He was one of my baseball coaches. Like, that's the kind of relationship that we had. But thinking about that now, like if a teacher did that to a kid now, holy crap, the whole world would come spinning to an end. And that teacher would be, just completely just like outcast from that school and all these other things. And it's just it boggles my mind how the pendulum swings when it comes to some of these things. Not to say that kicking a student out of a chair is okay, but at the time in our class, especially me with some of my friends who we played baseball and football and stuff, and he was our coach, it wasn't a big deal. Like it was his way of being like, dude, shut up. Like rather than me having to write you up or anything like that, just shut up. So anyway, so that's kind of the rest of that. And then the final topic, this is where I kind of switch things up here a little bit. The final topic I'll get on today is the whole 9/11 thing. And it was funny how yesterday it's the 17th anniversary of 9/11, and the one guy's calling about how, hey, how do you explain Tower 7 going down and yada, yada, yada. And Buzz even said it on the air. He's like, I'm not going to get into the conspiracy theories. I don't want to get into this crap. Like there's other shows that can do it. Lord knows the one show that I worked on back in Portland, which is Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis. He would get into it, which Clyde's a super cool dude. Man, I've known him now. My buddy worked for him back in 2002 when he was doing, his show like on weekend nights, like on an AM station in Portland, and now he's nationally syndicated, like in like 100 different radio stations or something like that. Like it's pretty cool listening to Clyde. He's one of those dudes. Like he's one of those kind of conspiracy theory guys, and he will take a look at that kind of stuff. And Clyde was just a pretty cool guy. But like when it comes to the 9/11 stuff, it's one of those moments where you truly remember exactly where you were. I remember after the first tower had fallen, I was downstairs. I was still living with my parents at the time. I had at this time I'd gone through a whole crap load of really crappy jobs, and I had enrolled back in school. This was right before I was going to get into radio, into the radio broadcasting program, um, uh, in 2001. So this is right before school started. So this happens, and I remember I was working at the time. I was a temp. I worked as a temp that summer doing a bunch of different jobs. I worked at a plastics factory. I worked at a where the hell else did I work? The plastics factory. Oh, mattress factory, like the guy that hauls the mattresses in the back. And then at this point, I was also doing inventory for an auto parts supply store. So basically, you go through and you count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay, there's 10 here, and then you leave a little sticky note. There's 10 there, and so on and so forth. And so I remember that's what I was working, but at the time it was 6 a.m. whenever like most of the stuff was going down, and it was after the one tower had fallen. My dad came into my room and he busts in and he's like, "Wake up!" He's like, "You need to turn on the news and watch this stuff." And I remember flipping it on, and I'd been out drinking the night before with my buddy, and I was super groggy. And I just remember sitting there and watching the second tower fall, and I was confused. Like, I mean, I'd only been awake for a few minutes, and I was confused because I was like, is this a replay? Like, what's going on here? Like, I wasn't sure what the hell was happening because my brain hadn't registered like there's like a terror attack happening in New York City at this point. And then the news of the Pentagon plane, and the other one that went down, and all these other things. And it was a really weird time. I remember hanging out at my buddy's apartment. This was, I think, 2 days after, so it would have been like September 13th, and like they'd still grounded all planes. Nobody was supposed to be in the sky, or it might have been later that night. And I just remember hanging out with them, and we're just, we were drinking some beers and seeing the lights of a plane in the sky, and all of us were like, "Is that supposed to be there? Like, is this a military plane? Like, what the hell's happening?" This was, all this stuff that was still going on, and we had a friend of ours who was in Alaska for the summer working a summer gig. And my one friend who I was hanging out with that night when we saw the plane, he was getting married. And I want to say he was getting married like just recently coming up, like his anniversary. So hell, it'd be a 17-year anniversary. Damn, congratulations, Shane and Jenny. And I just remember, like still like planning his wedding around these things, and I DJ'd his wedding, and like all those memories are still so vivid because it's one of those times, and that you're always going to remember crap like that. Like you're always going to remember what that experience felt like. And what was really funny is Joanna talking about how her nephews are learning about 9/11 in school, and that she tells them, "Yeah, I was alive. Like I remember what happened that day," and they're like, "Oh, no way! Like I can't believe that! Like it's amazing." And it was a really, really weird time. And like going back and looking and seeing like what would have been the headlines in the news probably on 9/12, I thought was pretty interesting. Although that would have been a slow ass news day. You're more than welcome to check the blog out if you want at buzzadamshow.com to put it up there. These were kind of the big news stories that were going to be talked about that day that were already in the news that probably would have been the headlines on the 12th of September if this event had not happened. And yeah, I think the biggest story, at least for me, would have been the fact that Michael Jordan, that's when he was about to announce his comeback, and he was going to play for the Washington Wizards. But yeah, so there's, my 9/11 stuff. I don't have a whole ton other than everybody else's regular kind of experience when it comes to 9/11. I remember flipping on the news. It was Gustav and Daria on 94.7 NRK back in Portland. That's who I was tuning into, and I was driving to that job where I was going to go count a bunch of auto parts. And I remember working in it and like sitting there, and everybody would always kind of try to keep an ear. They had a waiting room, like a lobby, where they had the news on. And I mean, obviously this was 9/11. It's on every single station. Like you're not getting away from this. And I remember as everybody would kind of like walk through the area trying to flip through and count the things, like everybody was always keeping an ear out just to see, because you didn't know, like, is something else going to happen? Is there a bomb somewhere? Something, going to blow up, and like not really knowing. And it was a very surreal time. And it's strange to think, uh, back then, here we are 17 years later, and it's just kind of one of those things that, it's now a history lesson the kids are learning in school. So it's an odd thing to think about. But anyway, that'll put an end to this week's AfterBuzz. Appreciate you guys hanging out here. Again, if you're checking this out as a podcast and you want to check it out live, you are always more than welcome to do so on YouTube. Head to the KLAQ channel on YouTube, and then it'll pop up right there when we go live. Also, make sure you subscribe. If you subscribe, that'll be like, hey, they're live. Because sometimes I got to do these things on Tuesdays because I do them on Wednesdays. So you can always, subscribe, check it out there. If at any means, you guys, want to check it out as a podcast, this does go up on iTunes, and this does go up, everything else, Google Play as well as a podcast, clearly an audio podcast. Going through, they'll check the YouTube chat here really quick, one more time. Unfortunately, you guys are typing way too much for me to keep up. And that would just be boring as hell if I just were to sit here and read it. But Green Eyed Ghost says, today you had a 33% increase in viewers with everything that was going on during the show. It was very entertaining, and think we need to have you move to the main room from now on. I appreciate the compliment, and it's, that's cool you guys think that, but it's not going to happen. It's still Buzz's show. It's Buzz Adams' morning show. So unfortunately, I'm stuck in my little room where I am for the time being. But yeah, today was an absolute blast of a show to do. And like, real quick note, one of the things that the way we used to do it when Buzz was gone, and this is especially when we started in those other markets, when we were on in Abilene and San Angelo, and at the time when it first kicked on in Midland, Odessa, was that we needed to keep Buzz's voice on. So if he was on vacation, we would run as much best of or replays as we could, because we needed to familiarize those markets with the whole show. It's now kind of gotten to the point we don't really need to do that as much. And one of the goals, one of the things that we had originally tried to do was we were trying to do, we do 3 segments an hour. And the way that it was is we would do 1 live segment and 2 best of segments, trying to keep that going as much as possible, which now that it's changed, there was, I think it was the last time Buzz was gone. It might have been in July. And we were wrapping up the show, and my boss Kevin kind of pulled me to the side, and he was like, "We need more of you guys." He's like, he's like, "The best of stuff is good. There's a reason we've done that." He goes, "But you guys are now putting on a solid show, and we want you guys to do more." So, and I mentioned to him that the philosophy of doing the 1 live and 2 replays for the 2 best of clips, and he said, he goes, "Switch that." He goes, "We want you guys on 2 live segments, and then maybe a best of clip if you want to do that." So, I mean, that was a pretty cool compliment. So I appreciate that you guys are enjoying it. I appreciate that you guys are enjoying the AfterBuzz. It's an absolute blast doing this for you guys. There's nothing I would rather do on this planet than to try to entertain you guys. And quite frankly, you sit here and listen to me babble for 37 minutes. So the fact that you guys are willing to sit through it, I'd say you're pretty okay in my book. And if you're checking this out on the podcast, by all means, you as well. So on that note, I appreciate it. Love you guys, and we'll see you guys tomorrow bright and early. Buzz says he'll be back tomorrow. We'll just see how those antibiotics are, settling in his stomach. Peace out.